we are still following the philosopher Soren Kirkegaard, the Danish author and theologian from 1813 to 1855. His lifespan was short, but his publications and qualities were much beyond his short lifetime. And we left him last time after he had debuted with three books in October 1843, after the trip to Berlin. And he had first the book, a small book he usually publishes once or twice a year about some Christian speeches, sermons. He does not really give these speeches, but he published them for the audience. And so he did that in his own name, while he, under pseudonyms, published two beautiful books, Fear and Tremblance and The Repetition. And we talked about Fear and Tremblance last time, how this ethical dilemma of making the right choice in a difficult situation was something that could face people. And he took the examples of Agamemnon and Iphigenia, his daughter, how he had to sacrifice her for the goodwill of his people, so they could get the winds of Artemis. And this story he was telling there is to reflect on the ethical dilemma that can happen in a practical way. And then he goes on to talk about the impossible ethical dilemma, the paradox, the unbelievable situation that Abraham got into and had to be stuck in with his son while he was that believer in God. He was asked to sacrifice him. And first of all, well, it's just opposite what God wants. He wants life and had forbidden killing. And so also God is of the good. And how could he do that? And so he was really in a big dilemma. And that's what made him to who he was. And this is what he goes in depth into, talking about that religious passion that can come to life for some people. And we left him with that book. He had one more published in 1843. That was the book of The Repetition. And that's a little strange book, also the title, The Repetition. What can you say about repetition? And that's what we're going to talk a bit about in this short talk here. The book of The Repetition from 1843 is about three persons. As usual, he hides behind a pseudonym when he wants to deliver the book. He called himself Farinelli. So this is a guy that has published a book under the name of Farinelli. We'll get back to why that, or why it could be. And then there is the author of this book called Constantine Constantinus, the one who is constant in his way of being. And then there is a young man who is in a kind of wilderness with himself. And then we have Job from the Old Testament also flourishing in the story and mentioned along the way, the telling about the repetition. And the repetition is about looking into how the effects of repetition are on the humans. And so he let these three voices talk about the repetition in their life. First of all, we have this Constantine who had been living with pleasures and thinks that repetition, well, that's the memory of things repeating themselves. And he believes they are the same thing. Repetition and memory are the same movement, just in opposite directions. What is remembered has been repeated backwards, while the repetition itself can be remembered forwards. And so this guy has his ideas that you are really living in a kind of repetition, loving that moment that was the best and going back to revive it all the time in your life. And that's the only thing you have. It's a kind of the lived memories you keep repeating for yourself, and they come back to you as reminders and memories of what you really wanted to repeat all your life, but really hasn't been able to or got out of. And so we have this first person in the story, Constantine, who is looking back at the papers of A in Either Or, the book published the year before, or in 1841. That book was a cornerstone. His publications, you can go back and listen to it in another video. And so he's he's looking back at that guy who seems to be living that repetition and wants to keep it going all the time. He's pleasure seeking. And this guy seems to be thinking, well, the repetition is the thing that can be loved, because you cannot keep just repeating the same things, but you can repeat the memories of them. And so you have to have love for that kind of memories to truly be happy. So this is the position of this guy Constantine, that to live is to repeat yourself. And so the repetition is the reality, and the reality's seriousness. The one who wants the repetition has really become mature. So this guy Constantine is still, according to Kierkegaard, well, still on the surface. He's not going to be totally right. He's going to be opposed by both the young man and the story of Job, and then by the author in his own way, bringing his voice in behind all this. But it's like he just got this idea, this guy, that repetition is the wear that will never leave. It's the one that's going to stay. And so you are between the memory and the hope of the repetition and the memory of it. But the real thing is to repeat what you really like. Therein lies the happiness. For most people, the happiness they get is to repeat what has already, is to remember and remind what has already gone, and they really can't be able to repeat something that was and then left. And the hope of that thing repeating itself is just something in the future you cannot really rely on. It's like something that is very fluctuous and easygoing from you. And so it's only the repetition that will give you that satisfaction, in his opinion. And that's why this Constantinos, he's really tired of just flacking around in the town and seeking new adventures and interest. And he don't want either to sit at home and just sit with his old man memories. This is not good, just as the other thing is not going to give him any satisfaction. Well, what he needs is to go to a place where the repetition can stay itself. And so he goes to another town. And strange enough, he chooses the town of Berlin in Germany. And we can all guess that, well, okay, maybe it's himself or part of himself traveling alongside that person, Constantine. And so it's Kierkegaard behind it all, that because he's gone back to Berlin seeking the old repetition and the happiness that was in that moment when he first arrived there. And so this guy is making the same trip. And he's not telling us that, and neither people do know that at that time, because he wrote under pseudonyms these books to keep them free of his person and maybe to hide a little bit away from whatever discussion they could arise around him in society. And that's a clever maneuver in a way, because you're not really sure how they're going to be received. And at the same time, you do not want the audience to be attached to the idea that, oh, it's that writer, that means he's going to tell me this and that. That's what happens to people when they see the name of a writer. Sometimes they already think they know how good things are or how bad things are. And so by going and traveling, he has went to get the experience of the repetition once more, and thereby forgetting the clever words of Heraclitus, the old philosopher from the times before Socrates, where he noticed that you cannot dive in the same river twice. It's not the same, and you are not the same. And so every time you go and bathe in the river or just dive in it, you have changed enough, and the river has changed its waters enough so that it's in a new way, a new person in a new river. And so that's why you cannot totally go and dive in the same river totally the same way as you did the first time. There's always some kind of change, either in you or the river, and both of you. This change is not maybe that big. People can go and dive in the river and just feel just as glad, as happy as before, and they think, well, it's the same experience we had before. I've done this 100 times, but you've actually only done it once, because that river you were diving in last time has moved. The waters, everything in it has moved, and things have stayed, but it's not totally the same. And so with you, it's the same thing. You have moved as a person. Time has moved you on to a new position. It's a very clever observation from Heraclitus that, well, you are not the same throughout all your life, but you change. Anyhow, this guy Constantine is really seeking that kind of repetition in the place he knew best and he knows and likes, and so he wanna revive that idea. But that repetition is impossible. It's a construction of the thoughts that has no way on the ground, he realizes. And so I realized there is no repetition, and my observation of life has been the correct one, he says in later in the talkings. And so now we have already, like, in a way, put this first person in place. He was trying to criticize that sensual person living on the surface, person A from either or, the aesthetic guy who's living out of the enjoyment of the moment and always moving to another new moment where he can find this joy ever repeating itself or wanting it to come back. And so he goes from one place to another, one party to another, one conversation to another, one meal to another, and so he keeps just living without any stabilization. And that was criticized in either or by that other person from the papers B, who was the ethic. It's about the duty in what you're doing and the love to the duty, and not just the love of the pleasure in the moment. That does not make sense. And so they have these correspondent in either or. But now he's like letting this Constantine look back at that situation and saying, okay, maybe the real pleasure and happiness is in the repetition of the things that are good enough, having them stable around you. But now he's going to be opposed by a young man. And so he meets this young man who is a poet and in love with a girl, but he has to push her away from him. And that young man seeks the help of this Constantine to get some kind of solution out of that. And he tells him that I am very heavy in my mind. I cannot really just push the girl away. I love her, but I need to be with my poetry. And so he wants to go back before that time where she existed in his life. And even though he still loves her and will still love her, he just want to go back to that situation where he could repeat his genius writing of these poems. And he needed a plan to do so, and he wanted to push her away by showing that he was not good enough, and that's to get the time to himself. And this young man, he goes to Stockholm, running away from his own situation, but then meets and talks to Constantine afterwards, and he wants like to try to live that kind of repetition project as this Constantine believes in. Go back and repeat what you like. That's the happiness in everything. But this young man is not really truly satisfied with that. So when he goes to Stockholm, he writes a letter to Constantine talking about that passion and telling him that that it is very hard to be awakened all the time, always aware, never dreaming or floating away from that awareness. And so, isn't it something you could get scared of, losing using your mind? Aren't you afraid of running wild in a terrible passion that would be some kind of disgust for humans? So what he's saying here is not really clear. You need a lot of time to just look into what is it really he's suffering of, this poet person. It's like he is in his own mind at the same time wanting to be normal and reaching out for that passion of his that he want to be in the same time. And that he can see that his way of thinking, the control of the thoughts over the mind and body and the feelings has had too much an effect. So he's afraid of losing his mind because he cannot contain everything he feels inside him. And that's also been seen as a criticism of the culture of that time, that over-rationality that can hit societies, leaving the feelings out of every kind of understanding. It's like he's blaming himself for not giving after for that love and leaving the poetry be, because he found joy and happiness in that, and he know it's his call. But when he found that girl, that's like something has changed, and that love should be the one that will fill in his life, instead of going back to repeat the same project with poetry, and at the same time go and repeat being hard to her, because he had to show a person of himself that needs a lot of repetition, showing his bad sides, bad manners, his way of doing things that are no good, so that she could get enough and run away from him. And this young man is not really at ease by doing either or these two things. And so he blames the mind, and he blames the rationality in all this, that why do we have to do these things instead of just living it out? And here he gets Job in his mind, and in the picture, Job is the prophet from the Old Testament, in my Arabic language called Ayub. So it's Job in the English version of it, anyhow. And so he's that person who were given a lot by God and was satisfied in his worship, and the devil could not really leave him alone. So he said to God, "Well, he's only like that because you've given him all this. You're giving it. You take it away, and you'll see how he'll turn against you." And God made that bet with the devil, that okay, I will do, and we will see. He won't turn. He will stay loyal to me. And so he does. He stays loyal despite really losing everything and getting in very, very hardships. He complains, all right, and he screams out loud, and he is dissatisfied, but he's never turning against God at any moment. He stays very, very true to his belief and his case there. And he brings him in this story. And so Job gets everything back later when the Satan has lost the bet with God and couldn't really make that person turn. And so he gets it all back, double up somehow, because, well, he deserved it and more like it, and he forgot all the sufferings that were in it. It's a very beautiful and strong story that deserves a lot of talk and analyze and existential reflection in another place. But well, he's using this story here as part of how to look at the situation from a third perspective than the one of both Constantine and the young man. It's like we are jumping from the first type of repetition, that is seeking the pleasures. Keep repeating the pleasures you have on the surface and you're happy. And he says this is not really ringing through. And so, okay, let's repeat the pleasures of living a stable, ethical life with your wife and your kids and what you have around you. And that didn't even fulfill everything that he needed. But he says here that with Job, we understand a third type of repetition, the repetition of being resurrected. And that you are, in a way, in an eternal way, becoming alive in that kind of repetition. So it will never end, it will never be lost. It's like you got something and you got taken away from you, but then in the eternity you will be given it again to repeat ever after and to have for your blessings ever after. So suddenly he's opening up a third perspective, that there is a kind of repetition, enjoyment in what God has promised, and that you can get it under the light of eternity and the light of some kind of resurrection that you're gonna go through. So you're gonna repeat your life, you're gonna repeat what you have wanted and lost, but in this time it will be eternal. It's like he opens a third dimension altogether. It's like he's leaving Earth and not talking about the guy using his pleasures for here and now moments and then anyhow doesn't get satisfied. And neither is he like that ethical guy who's just having love for the duty, even though the duty is not really bringing him happiness, but the happiness is in doing the duty itself, even though he's not really happy. That's what we sense out of the person B. And then we have this climatus that thinks that, well, keep repeat things that you like, and that's all you have, because the memories of it is not enough, and repeating it all in a shallow manner is not going to satisfy you either. But here he lifts us to another dimension altogether, bringing this sense that there is another way that you can get this repetition to make more sense. It's like something in you will be awakened when things are given you and you try them out and they're taken from you. Then you can wait for that thunderstorm and the repetition once more, as this young man is writing in his letter to Clematis. So I'm waiting for the thunderstorm and for the repetition, he says to him. And so when this young poet has been in Stockholm and writing back to his friend Clematis and telling him about what happened to the girl he loved, and he in the last letter tells him, well, she got married and everything is over. I cannot go back. I cannot repeat that thing, and I cannot live that love story. But then what he finds is the gate to looking into that eternity, and that is related to himself. And he says, well, I am myself once again. Here I have the repetition. I understand everything, and the reality seems to me more beautiful than ever. I am myself again. This self that another wouldn't take on him on the road is mine to owe again. The shatter that was in my way of being, in my inner spirit, is now lifted, and I am pulled together again as a whole. Isn't that a repetition? Didn't I get double of what I gave? Didn't I become myself again exactly as doubled? It must have been the meaning of it. So I am myself again, and the machinery is in the movement. So how to understand this? It's like he's turning inward to pull himself together and make what he had experienced, and the thunderstorm that comes out of the shattering, it brings a new wholeness to the person once more, where he understands things but become whole with himself in a new way. So in that way, nothing is lost. Things have been shattered and gone, but when he is whole again, has found himself truly, he can recognize everything. And so that kind of repetition that's going to happen is also, you can say, the kind of the renewal that will be eternal, the eternal renewal and the eternal kind of resurrection. We are truly here in a place where we are between the lived life and a philosophy of the metaphysics. It's like also a gate to show you that yourself can also have these breaks through your life, and by finding a way to look inward and make the repetition of finding yourself through that repetition and through pulling yourself together, you will become whole again. So how to do that, how to become yourself in that deeper sense than just flocking around like the aesthetic, or living in that traditional way that just goes to become boredom because of the duty in it and no passion, and or just try to push the love away from yourself to go and repeat the thing you like, being a poet or whatever you like, and so not fulfilling yourself in neither the first or the second way. Well, here you can find that story of Job, that even though you lose, it's a kind of breakthrough because you go and find something in yourself. And this finding can be either tragical or happy. He's not putting the tragical away. He's actually addressing it in many ways, that this tragical ending can happen. And so, because this young man is not like Job, Job was innocent and was put on trial just because it was a bet, so God could show the devil that he would lose. And in this case, we have this young poem, or maybe Kierkegaard himself, as the guilty part. He's not really innocent of not really fulfilling the girl's dreams of marriage and his own dreams as well. So he's guilty towards himself as well, and so he receives this thunder strike of tragedy that hits in his life and the shattering. And so in that way, he will either die tragically in that, and so it will end there, or he will put himself together and find that strengthness that renew him in many ways and renew his identity and who he really is inside of himself. And so he will be transformed in many ways, even though the situation is new and not really the same as before. So in a way, it's a kind of repetition of what he wanted to be, but got lost because, first of all, he was the sensual one. He wanted to be that poem that brought these ideas to life in his writings and his words, and like touched people's hearts and minds. But then he got lost in the sensuality, and back from there he was on the edge of becoming that ethical person who could have lived that life. But then by both illusions shattering in his life, and he's really had this hard break in his heart and situation he could not come over, by finding himself again anyhow through the gates of Job, by really giving yourself up to that faith in God and understanding that, well, the God is giving and the Lord is taking, and whatever is his. And so in that way you pull yourself free and in a way receive what is to be received, and so become whole again. And so he's turning our attention to that religious depth and absolute way of like giving yourself up to the idea that, well, let things happen as they're happening, and there is growth in it if you can overcome it. At the same time, both the Constantine, the young man, and Kierkegaard behind them are really realizing and writing about it. This must be some exception from the rule, because most people won't be able to do so. There must be some great souls on earth who has this ability to go about doing so in their life, and they will be the exceptions, the extraordinary existence, the individuals that are outside the ordinary and must be respected differently than most other people. We have here a very great romantic idea from the time of Romanticism, that there are some big souls that always wanders on earth, even though people do not notice it or understand it. They have a spirit that is deeper and a horizon that is wider, and a way of living and reasoning that won't fit in the minds of most people. So that's why if you're listening here like I am, well, you can like just stand and have question marks on what's going on here and why is it has to be that way. Most of the people would just has stayed in the sensuality part. Those who went on would go to the ethical part, and those who went on would maybe become that part-time poet, but living his love life. And he cannot combine both, because a great spirit cannot shelter these two type of loves. He will have to give one up for the other, and that's the dilemma Kierkegaard had in his life earlier on with Regina, because he could not really give up being that writer and philosopher and the person who want to bring life to these ideas and writings, like giving birth to a new understanding through these dialogues he's putting out. And so this is the same here with the repetition. It circles back to the idea of, well, what is worth repeating? And that is what gives you your wholeness in yourself. It's going back to yourself and becoming whole. This is the repetition of the life, but this time with a wholeness in you that puts everything together. And so you become very special in that sense, because you have been through a lot of things. It's like you've been burned in the ashes, and you've been through torture and suffering and a lot of things, and then gets reborn again. That this is why he's touching on that issue of the rebirth and the issue of resurrection, because being resurrected in the one and same life without dying, he's not talking about dying. He's talking about the lived life here and now, that you can go through things that actually in a way kills your old self and brings to life a new one, or maybe makes the old one renew itself, so it will repeat itself, but just in another way. It will become more than it was before in a way. So this is the book about the repetition that he also published in 1843 after the trip to Berlin. And later on in that year, he went on in 1844-45, repeating the act of the hat trick. He published 18 upbuilding speeches or preaching speeches. He never held these speeches because he wasn't an ordained priest. He was not a priest that had been ordained to take over a church. He was just the theologian who had a magister, like a candidatus degree in understanding theology and religion and Christianity. At the same time, he was philosophizing over life, doing so under a pseudonym. So when he writes these 18 speeches for the soul, to upbuild the soul and the morals, he is under his own name, and he starts writing deeper and deeper. Usually he does that with taking a place in the Bible and writing around it and over it, and just like attaching to the meaning of it in life. And so he leave it as a way that people could read and understand. It was also very much taken into our times as well, and it was very much given appreciation by several priests in his time, and that Bishop Münster, who really liked these speeches, these inspirational speeches that he could give. And so he had these qualities in them where he could make some reflections in a very ordinary, if you can say so, way. Ordinary, at least when you compare it to his other writings that are under the pseudonyms. And so later he will be gathering much of his thinking there in what will be called the Acts of Love in the book from 1847. But back to that later. The next episode or part we're going to talk about is two of his books. There is these 18 speeches he's going to publish, and then there is two also important central works in his life. The one is from 1844, a small philosophical, it's called, and the second one is about the phrase angst, or the word angst. He's gonna circle around the word angst, and that is also a very profound text that also left a lot of impact and reading among people up until now. Yeah, so we are halfway through 1844. He has 11 years yet to live, and still a lot to publish and talk about and repeat. And so maybe you are becoming aware, like I am and has been, and still becoming aware why he got his position on the scene of philosophy and existential religious ideas, because he did these movements in his life, both using himself, the theater, the different way of writing, the pseudonyms, the very, very deep understanding of the human ideas and nature. Because of all his talks, he went up and down Copenhagen's streets, talking to people, stopping up, listening to them, asking them questions. And so he learned a lot about the different type of people he met, and I think he finally categorized them and put them in some kind of order in his head, that there are these and that and those and this type and that. And so he says very fondly, very funny in one way, the humans, it is said that the humans have gotten the ability to speak, to hide its thoughts. And he turned that around and saying, well, the humans have not gotten the ability to speak, to hide the thoughts, but to hide that they have no thoughts. And that's true for most people, that they really do not think before they talk, and they just talk to fill out the silence. So you just have to talk, make some noise, and when you are left back afterwards with what it is you have really listened to, it's nothing. And so this is what he gives us here. It's a kind of a reflection on the human lived life through these different authorships and situations and positions that actually resounds in many, what can you say, resounds in many hearts and minds. Even today, when I'm reading this, I can like, okay, yeah, I can reflect on that, and maybe I can mirror myself in that situation. And the idea of finding yourself and becoming whole before the right resurrection, that's a very beautiful touchdown, if you can say so, with American football. And it's a beautiful star that you suddenly reach to in your mind of ideas. It's just like you get a bright understanding all of a sudden, and this is what makes it so, for me, very special. It may be something else that makes it special for you, and that's what you have to find whenever you are listening to these topics or reading about them. And so until next time, about the new books from 1844.